I always thought being the perfect daughter meant something in this family. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect smile in every family photo. For 25 years, I believed if I just tried hard enough, worked hard enough, smiled wide, enough, maybe then they'd see me as more than just the charity case they brought home from the adoption agency. My name is Olivia Bennett, and if you've ever heard of Bennett Wealth Management, the financial empire that dominates the Midwest, you already know my last name. What most people don't know is that the family in Bennett Family Wealth Management never truly included me. I spent my childhood in the shadow of the massive Bennett estate in Oakridge, Connecticut, trailing behind my father and older brothers during take your child to work days. While they learned investment strategies and client management, I was relegated to filing papers and bringing coffee. My suggestions were met with patronizing smiles and quick subject changes. The message was clear. The business of money was for the real Bennetts. The irony? I was the one who graduated summa cum laude in finance. I was the one who earned my MBA from Wharton while working full-time. I was the one who could recite our client portfolio statistics from memory and predict market trends with uncanny accuracy, but apparently, bloodlines trump talent in the Bennett household. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Part 1. The Seed of Potential. The Bennett family home is a sprawling colonial mansion set on 10 acres of perfectly manicured grounds. Growing up, I learned to navigate its spaces carefully. The grand dining room where important clients were entertained, the mahogany-paneled study where my father, Charles Bennett, made his most lucrative deals, and the sunroom where my mother, Elizabeth, hosted her society friends for afternoon tea. Then there was my room, tucked away in the East Wing, beautiful but somehow separate from the heart of the house. Much like my position in the family. Olivia has such a good head for numbers, my father would say to clients. The same way one might comment on a dog that could perform an impressive trick. Not our genetic gift, of course, but she's quite the hard worker. These backhanded compliments became the soundtrack of my childhood. The constant reminder that while I carried their name, I didn't carry their blood. My brothers, James and William, were being groomed to take over Bennett Wealth Management from the moment they could count. Family dinners were filled with discussions about portfolio diversification and market fluctuations. I absorbed every word, fascinated by the intricate dance of numbers and strategy. When I'd offer an insight, the table would fall silent before someone would pat my hand and say, "That's sweet, Olivia." Sweet, not smart, not insightful, not worthy of real consideration. Despite the subtle dismissals, I persisted. I graduated high school at 16 and earned a full scholarship to Princeton for undergraduate studies in finance. Well, she's always been academically inclined, my mother would tell her friends, as if my achievements were a curious personality quirk rather than evidence of ability. During college breaks, I'd intern at Bennett Wealth Management, hoping my credentials would finally earn me a legitimate place at the table. I spent nights analyzing client portfolios, identifying patterns the senior advisors had missed. I developed a proprietary algorithm for risk assessment that could have revolutionized our approach to retirement planning. This is impressive work, my father admitted when I presented it to him in his study one evening. For a moment, hope flickered. Perhaps this would be the turning point. He set the report aside. "You know, your perspective is unique, being somewhat removed from the Bennett approach. You see things differently." "Is that bad?" I asked. "Not bad, just not Bennett." He smiled, the conversation clearly over in his mind. "Your brothers have a natural instinct for this business. It's in their blood." There it was again. Blood. The one thing I could never offer. Still, I continued to excel. My graduate thesis on sustainable investing models won national recognition. Top firms in New York and Chicago courted me with impressive offers, but I turned them all down. I wanted to prove myself at Bennett Wealth Management, to earn my place in the family legacy through sheer merit and determination. At 25, I was finally given a position as junior financial advisor, though everyone knew it was several levels below what my qualifications warranted. My office was small, tucked away from the main floor where James and William sat in spacious corner offices despite having less experience and fewer credentials. "You should be grateful," my mother reminded me during one Sunday dinner when I'd casually mentioned the disparity. "Most people spend years working up to your position." "Most people didn't graduate top of their class from Wharton," I countered. "Olivia?" My father's voice carried that warning tone I'd known since childhood. "You've always had such high expectations. We gave you opportunities most adopted children could only dream of." The table fell silent. My mother studiously examined her roast beef. James and William exchanged glances. The word adopted hung in the air like an accusation, a reminder of why I would always be on the outside looking in. "I'm going to propose a new division," I said suddenly, breaking the tension. "Sustainable and ethical investing. It's where the market is headed, especially with millennial clients. I've done the research, prepared projections. We could be ahead of the curve." My father chuckled. "Sustainable investing? That's a niche market at best. Our clients want reliable returns, not feel-good investments in wind farms." "Actually," I pressed on, "ethical investing portfolios have outperformed traditional ones by an average of 3% over the past 5 years. I've prepared a complete analysis." William rolled his eyes. Here comes Professor Olivia with her statistics again. "It's not just statistics," I insisted. "It's the future. And it's a direction that would distinguish us from every other firm in the region." "We don't need to distinguish ourselves," my father said firmly. "Bennett Wealth Management has a 70-year reputation built on traditional values and proven methods. Your brothers understand this. It's intuitive to them. More code for, it's in their blood." "Give me 6 months," I pleaded. "Let me build a pilot program with a small portfolio. If it doesn't perform, I'll drop it." My father sighed, exchanging a look with my mother that I recognized all too well. The Olivia's being difficult again look. "We'll discuss this at the office," he said finally, signaling the end of the conversation. The discussion never happened, of course. My proposal email sat unanswered. My meeting requests were perpetually rescheduled. Meanwhile, William's half-baked idea for a high-risk hedge fund division was approved within a week, complete with a dedicated team and marketing budget. I threw myself into my assigned client load, determined to prove my worth through results. My clients' portfolios consistently outperformed company averages. I brought in several significant new accounts. I worked longer hours than anyone, arriving before dawn and leaving well after sunset. One evening, I was still at my desk at 9 p.m., finalizing a complex retirement strategy for a key client. The office was quiet, most of the staff long gone. I heard voices from the conference room. My father, James, and William, apparently in some kind of celebration. I shouldn't have gone to investigate. Something in me must have known what I would find. But curiosity pulled me down the hallway. The door was ajar, and through the crack, I could see them raising glasses of expensive scotch. "To the future of Bennett Wealth Management," my father toasted, "and to the official announcement of our new leadership structure." My breath caught. I hadn't heard about any leadership announcements. James as CEO and William as COO by this time next year, my father continued. The perfect team to carry the Bennett legacy forward. "What about Olivia?" asked Susan Harrington, our HR director. I hadn't realized she was in the room. My father's response would change everything. "Olivia is talented, no question. She'll continue as a senior advisor, perhaps with her own client." group eventually, but leadership? He shook his head. Bennett Wealth Management was built by Bennett's for Bennetts. Blood matters in this business. Client relationships span generations because they trust we're passing down our values through our bloodline. Besides, William added with a laugh, can you imagine Olivia trying to schmooze clients at the country club? She'd probably lecture them about carbon footprints while they're ordering steaks. The room erupted in laughter. She just doesn't have the Bennett instinct, James agreed. She's all data and theory, no feel for the human side of wealth. We've given her every opportunity, my mother chimed in, surprising me with her presence. But at some point, we have to be realistic about what family really means. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. All these years of working twice as hard, of collecting degrees and accolades, of sacrificing my personal life for this company, and it had never mattered. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I would never be enough because I didn't share their DNA. I returned to my office in a daze, my carefully constructed world crumbling around me. On my desk sat the retirement plan I'd been perfecting, strategies that would ensure my clients' financial security for decades to come. Strategies that I now realized would earn commissions for a company that would never truly value my contributions. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Instead, I felt something shift inside me, a clarity I had never experienced before. If blood was what mattered to the Bennetts, then perhaps it was time to discover what mattered to me. I stayed up until dawn, not working on client portfolios but crafting my resignation letter. Alongside it, I developed the complete business plan for the ethical investing division they had dismissed, a vision that suddenly felt like mine alone to pursue. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, printed my resignation letter, and placed it on my father's desk before anyone else arrived. Then I packed my personal items, embarrassingly few for someone who had spent so many years in this building, and walked out without looking back. My phone rang incessantly throughout the day. My father, my mother, even James. I silenced them all. For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking their approval or trying to earn my place in their family. I was choosing myself. That evening, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by boxes, I had already been planning to move to a larger place closer to the office, another investment in a future that would never happen. My doorbell rang. It was my mother, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, pushing past me into the apartment. "Your father is furious. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities like this." "My responsibilities?" I repeated. "Or my place? Because last night made it very clear what my place is at Bennett Wealth Management." Her face paled. "You were eavesdropping." I was working late. Again, unlike some people who were born into the right to lead. Don't be dramatic, Olivia. You've always had such a flair for theatrics. Is it dramatic to want recognition for my work? To expect that my qualifications might matter more than my genetic connection to Charles Bennett? "We gave you everything," my mother hissed, her composure slipping. "We gave you our name, a life of privilege, the best education money could buy. And this is how you repay us? With tantrums and resignations? You gave me everything except what I actually needed. Acceptance, respect, a fair chance." "Fair?" She laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about fair? Do you know what's not fair? That we took you in, raised you as our own, when you were nothing to us. No obligation, nothing." The words hung between us, sharp and irretrievable. "I see," I said quietly. "So I should be grateful that you deigned to adopt me at all. That makes the years of subtle exclusion okay. You don't understand what it means to build a legacy," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Bennett Wealth Management isn't just a company. It's generations of our family's work, our reputation, our blood. There it is again, blood. I shook my head. You know what, Mother? You're right. I'm not a Bennett by blood. And after today, I won't be a Bennett by name either. Her eyes widened. What are you saying? I'm saying I resign from this family as well as the company. I'll be taking back my original surname. You'll be free of the obligation of pretending I'm part of your precious bloodline. You're being childish, she snapped. Where will you go? What will you do? You've built your entire identity around being a Bennett. That struck deeper than I wanted to admit. She was right. I had spent my life trying to earn the Bennett name. Who was I without it? I guess I'll find out, I replied, moving toward the door. I think you should leave now. She hesitated, perhaps waiting for me to crumble, to apologize, to beg for another chance to prove myself worthy of the mighty Bennett name. When I didn't, her expression hardened. You were never our real child anyway, she said coldly. Just a project Elizabeth took on when the doctors told her she couldn't have a daughter of her own. A vanity adoption. That's what your father called it. The words should have devastated me. Instead, they set me free. Goodbye, Elizabeth, I said, using her first name for the first time in my life. Please tell the family not to contact me again. After she left, I sat alone in my half-packed apartment, feeling strangely calm. The worst had happened. They had confirmed what I had always suspected. I wasn't a real Bennett. Never had been, never would be. But as I looked at the business plan sitting on my coffee table, my vision, my values, my future, I realized something important. Maybe not being a Bennett was exactly what I needed to become who I was meant to be. That night, I booked a one-way ticket to Seattle, where the growing tech industry was creating a new class of wealth seekers who might be open to a different approach to financial management. I would start fresh, build something authentic, and never again try to earn a place at a table where I wasn't truly welcome. Little did I know that across the country, an elderly woman named Margaret Hayes was meeting with her lawyer, reviewing her will, and asking about the granddaughter she had never been allowed to meet, a child who had been adopted by a wealthy Connecticut family named Bennett 25 years ago. The universe, it seemed, had surprises in store for all of us. Seattle greeted me with rain, not the gentle mist Connecticut rain, but a deliberate downpour that seemed to wash away the last 25 years of my life. I stood outside the airport with a single suitcase, watching sleek cars splash through puddles, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The small downtown apartment I'd hastily rented online was nothing like the sprawling Bennett state. A studio with exposed brick walls, tall windows, and the constant hum of a nearby coffee shop. No housekeeper, no gardener, no family chef. Just me, my savings, and the business plan I'd tucked carefully into my carry-on bag. For the first 3 days, I barely left the apartment. I alternated between second-guessing my decision and furiously refining my vision for an ethical investment firm. My phone continued to light up with calls and messages from Connecticut. My father's terse demands to stop this nonsense immediately, my mother's manipulative guilt trips, even James's awkward attempts at reconciliation. I responded to none of them. On the 4th day, I woke to an email notification from the Connecticut Department of Vital Records. My request for a copy of my original birth certificate, filed in the dazed hours after leaving the Bennett household, had been processed. The attachment sat in my inbox like a time bomb. For 25 years, my adoption had been a fact, without details. My parents had shared only the basics. I was adopted as an infant, my birth mother was very young, no father was listed on the birth certificate. Any attempts to learn more were met with swift redirection. We're your family. Now, Olivia, why dig up the past? With trembling fingers, I opened the attachment. The document was clinical, sparse. My original name, Olivia Hayes. Mother, Charlotte Hayes, age 19. Father, unknown. Place of birth, Northside Hospital, Atlanta, Georgia. Hayes. A name that meant nothing to me, yet everything. A name that was authentically mine. I repeated it aloud. Olivia Hayes. It sounded foreign on my tongue, like someone else's identity I was trying on. But it was mine. The first thing that had ever been truly mine, not bestowed by the benevolent Bennetts. That afternoon, I ventured into the rain-slicked streets of Seattle with a new purpose. I opened a bank account under Olivia Hayes. I applied for a new driver's license. I even introduced myself to the barista at the corner cafe as Olivia Hayes. Each time I said it, the name felt more real, more like me. By week's end, I'd rented a small office space in a converted warehouse in South Lake Union. Nothing fancy, just a room with a desk, a computer, and a view of constantly shifting clouds over the Puget Sound. I painted the door myself, a deep teal that felt nothing like the mahogany-paneled halls of Bennett Wealth Management. Below the door number, I affixed a simple plaque, Principled Capital, Olivia Hayes, founder. Starting from nothing was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had no clients, no reputation in Seattle, no family connections to leverage. What I did have was my education, my experience, and a vision that Bennett Wealth Management had been too entrenched in tradition to appreciate. My first client came through pure serendipity. While working late one evening, I overheard a heated conversation. In the hallway, a woman arguing with someone on the phone about investment options for her tech startup. "I don't want to put my money in companies that contradict everything we stand for," she was saying. "No, I don't care about maximizing short-term returns if it means investing in fossil fuels or companies with human rights violations." Before I could second-guess myself, I stepped into the hallway. "Excuse me," I said when she hung up. I couldn't help overhearing. I might be able to help. The woman, Maya Lynn, as I would learn, looked skeptical but desperate. Her sustainable home goods startup had just received a round of funding, and she needed someone to manage it who understood both finance and her ethical priorities. "Why should I trust you?" she asked bluntly after I'd explained my background. "You're working out of a closet-sized office with furniture I'm pretty sure came from a thrift store." I smiled. Because unlike the leather chair firms downtown, I built this company specifically to serve clients like you. I won't push you toward investments that contradict your values just because they offer better commissions. She studied me for a long moment. "How do I know you're qualified?" I handed her my resume without the Bennett name attached. Let my education and experience speak for themselves. "Wharton MBA, impressive," she murmured. "Why Seattle? Why this?" She gestured at my modest office. "I wanted to build something authentic," I said simply. "Something that reflected my values, not someone else's legacy." Something in my words resonated with her. By the end of the week, Maya had transferred her company's investment portfolio to Principled Capital. It wasn't a huge account, but it was a start. More importantly, it was based on merit and shared values, not family obligation or social connections. Maya introduced me to other startup founders in her network, mostly women and minorities, who had also felt marginalized by traditional financial institutions, people who, like me, had something to prove. My client list grew slowly but steadily. I worked punishing hours, handling everything myself, from investment strategies to bookkeeping to keeping the office plants alive. 6 months into my Seattle experiment, I was scraping by. My savings had dwindled, and while my client base was growing, most were startups with limited funds to invest. I ate a lot of instant ramen and worked until my eyes burned. But for the first time in my life, every accomplishment was unquestionably mine. No one could say I succeeded because of the Bennett name or claim my achievements for their legacy. It was during this lean period that I received the letter. Plain envelope, Atlanta postmark, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single page of expensive stationery. The letterhead read, Callaway and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Dear Ms. Hayes, it began, and the use of my birth name sent a chill down my spine. How had they found me? I'd only recently reclaimed the name, and my Seattle address was new. The letter continued. Our firm represents Mrs. Margaret Hayes of Atlanta, Georgia. It has come to our attention that you may be the granddaughter of our client. Mrs. Hayes has been searching for her granddaughter, the daughter of Charlotte Hayes, for many years. If you are indeed this person, Mrs. Hayes would welcome contact from you at your convenience. Please find enclosed our business card and private contact information. I read the letter 3 times, emotions colliding like storm fronts. My grandmother. A woman I hadn't known existed. A woman who had been searching for me. Why now? Why after 25 years? And how had she found me when I'd only recently reclaimed the Hayes name? Trust doesn't come easily when you've spent your life trying to earn a place in a family that never fully accepted you. My immediate instinct was suspicion. Was this some elaborate ploy by the Bennetts to lure me back? A cruel joke? Or perhaps a scam targeting vulnerable adoptees? I set the letter aside and tried to focus on work, but the questions multiplied. Did Charlotte Hayes, my birth mother, know about this? Was she involved? What did Margaret Hayes want from me after all this time? After 3 days of distraction, I called the law firm. The receptionist transferred me immediately to Daniel. Callaway himself. Apparently my call had been anticipated. Ms. Hayes, he greeted me warmly. I'm very pleased you reached out. How did you find me? I asked, skipping pleasantries. Your grandmother has had our firm monitoring name change records and new business registrations under the Hayes name for years, he explained. When you established principled capital under your birth name, it triggered an alert in our system. That seems extensive, I said carefully. Margaret Hayes is a determined woman, he replied, a hint of admiration in his voice. She's been searching for you since she learned of your existence 5 years ago. 5 years? But I was adopted 25 years ago. There was a pause. I think these are details best explained by Mrs. Hayes herself. She would very much like to meet you, Ms. Hayes. She's elderly and in declining health. Would you consider flying to Atlanta? My immediate thought was that I couldn't afford the trip. My fledgling business was barely staying afloat. As if reading my mind, Callaway continued. Of course, all expenses would be covered. Mrs. Hayes insists. It felt like another trap, accepting financial help from a stranger claiming to be family. Hadn't I just escaped one family that measured my worth by their financial support? I need to think about it, I replied. Of course. Take whatever time you need. His tone remained perfectly professional, but I detected an undertone of urgency. However, I should mention that Mrs. Hayes's health is precarious. If meeting her is something you might eventually want, I wouldn't recommend delaying too long. Classic pressure tactic, I thought cynically. But what if it was true? What if this was my only chance to learn about my birth family, to understand where I came from? I'll let you know my decision by the end of the week, I promised. That night I couldn't sleep. The practical part of me, the financial advisor, listed all the reasons not to go. I couldn't afford the time away from my struggling business. This could be an elaborate scam. Or worse, this Margaret Hayes might be another disappointment. Another person who saw me as an obligation rather than a person. But another part of me, perhaps the part that had never stopped hoping for real family connection, couldn't let it go. If nothing else, meeting Margaret Hayes might provide answers I'd spent a lifetime seeking. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would go to Atlanta, but on my terms. I wouldn't accept the prepaid ticket Callaway offered. Instead, I scraped together enough to purchase my own economy fare. a financial strain that would require eating ramen for another month, but worth it for the independence it provided. I could walk away at any time without obligation. The Atlanta that greeted me bore no resemblance to the city of my birth. I remembered nothing of it, of course, having left as an infant. But as the taxi wound through the lush green neighborhoods of Buckhead, I found myself searching for some sense of familiarity, some genetic memory of belonging. The Hayes residence was not what I expected. I'd imagined something grand and intimidating, perhaps projecting my Bennett upbringing onto this unknown family. Instead, the taxi stopped before a modest colonial-style home set back from the road, surrounded by ancient oak trees. The garden was well-tended but not ostentatious. It looked like a home, not a statement. Daniel Calloway met me at the door, a tall, distinguished man in his 60s with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Miss Hayes, welcome. Your grandmother is waiting for you in the sunroom. She's having a good day today, which isn't always the case." He led me through the house, which was decorated in a timeless, understated style. Family photographs lined the hallway walls, and I couldn't help searching the faces for resemblances to my own. I didn't see any obvious connections, but I did notice one young woman who appeared in several photos, always smiling brightly. Something about her expression felt hauntingly familiar. "Is that Charlotte?" I asked, pausing before one frame. Calloway nodded. "Your mother, yes. Margaret keeps these photos everywhere. She never stopped loving her daughter, even during their years of estrangement." Estrangement. The word hung in the air between us as we continued down the hallway. I wanted to ask more, but felt the answers should come from Margaret herself. The sunroom was bathed in warm morning light. Seated in a high-backed chair by the window was a woman who appeared both fragile and formidable. Margaret Hayes couldn't have been more than 70, but illness had clearly taken a toll. Still, her posture was impeccable. Her silver hair perfectly styled, her gaze sharp and evaluative as I entered the room. "So," she said, her voice stronger than her appearance suggested, "you're Charlotte's girl." No warm embrace, no tears, just a straightforward acknowledgement that caught me off guard after the emotional buildup. "I'm Olivia," I replied, suddenly unsure of how to introduce myself. "Hayes? Bennett?" Who was I to this stranger? "Olivia," she repeated, as if testing the name. They at least kept that. "Charlotte named you for her grandmother, my mother." "I didn't know that." I remained standing awkwardly, unsure of the protocol. Margaret gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, please. We have a great deal to discuss, and unfortunately, my energy doesn't last as long as it once did." I sat, noting how her hands trembled slightly despite her composed demeanor. Whatever illness she battled, she was clearly determined not to let it define this meeting. "I imagine you have questions," she said. "About Charlotte. About why you were adopted. About why I've searched for you now, after all this time." "All of those, yes," she nodded. "I'll be direct then. Charlotte, your mother, was 19 when she had you. Brilliant, headstrong, and entirely unprepared for motherhood. She was in her first year at Emory, on scholarship. Your father was her professor, married, influential, and completely unwilling to acknowledge his responsibility." The bluntness of her disclosure startled me. No sugarcoating, no gentle revelations. "My husband, your grandfather, was a traditional man with rigid ideas about family honor. When Charlotte told us she was pregnant, he gave her two options: marry quickly to someone suitable, or give the baby up for adoption. He would accept no compromise, no scandal." "And she chose adoption," I said quietly. Margaret's expression tightened. "What she chose was to leave. She refused both options, insisted she would raise you herself. We fought bitterly. Things were said that couldn't be unsaid. She packed a bag and walked out." Her voice wavered for the first time. That was the last time I saw my daughter. What happened? I whispered, though part of me already sensed the answer. Charlotte survived on her own for nearly 7 months of the pregnancy. She took a leave from school, worked 2 jobs, rented a tiny apartment. She called once just to tell me she was managing fine without us. Margaret's eyes grew distant. Then complications developed late in the pregnancy. She was rushed to Northside Hospital. You were delivered safely, but Charlotte... She paused, swallowing hard. She died. I finished for her, a cold certainty settling over me. Margaret nodded. Postpartum hemorrhage. By the time I was notified, you had already been taken by social services. Charlotte had signed provisional adoption papers as a precaution, given her circumstances. I tried to find you, to claim you, but my husband refused to support the effort. In his mind, the adoption was the solution to the family's shame, not its tragedy. So you just gave up? I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. I did, she admitted, meeting my gaze directly. It's the greatest regret of my life, Olivia. I let my husband's pride and my own grief dictate my actions. I told myself you would have a better life with adoptive parents who chose you, who were prepared for a child. The Bennetts, I said, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. Yes, I was told they were a prestigious family from Connecticut. Wealthy, well-connected, unable to have more children after their sons. They wanted a daughter desperately. She studied my face. I see from your expression that the reality was more complicated. I said nothing, unwilling to share the details of my Bennett life with this woman who was still a stranger. What changed? I asked instead. You said you've been looking for me for 5 years. Margaret's hands folded in her lap, the tremor more pronounced. Douglas, your grandfather, died 5 years ago. His last words to me were about regret. He asked me to find you, to tell you about Charlotte, to try to make amends if possible. She gave a sad smile. Too little, too late, but it freed me to finally honor my daughter's memory by finding her child. And now you have, I said, uncertain what she expected from me. Forgiveness? Gratitude? Family feeling for a grandmother I'd just met? Now I have, she agreed. And while I don't deserve any place in your life, I wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know that you were loved, Olivia. Charlotte loved you fiercely, enough to defy her family, to sacrifice everything to try to keep you. And her voice broke. I have loved the idea of you for 25 years. The granddaughter I let slip away. The raw emotion in her voice reached something in me, some long-buried longing for connection that even the Bennett's rejection hadn't killed. Why contact me now? Beyond clearing your conscience? The question came out harsher than I intended. If Margaret was offended, she didn't show it. Because time is something I no longer have in abundance. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The treatments buy me months, not years. The clinical assessment of her mortality stunned me into silence. I don't tell you this to earn your sympathy, Olivia, only to explain my urgency. When Daniel found you in Seattle, found that you'd reclaimed the Hayes name, that you'd started your own financial firm, it seemed like a sign. Charlotte had the same independent spirit, the same determination. You know about my company? I asked, surprised. Daniel is quite thorough in his research. She almost smiled. Principled capital, ethical investing. It's impressive work, especially for someone starting from scratch. There was something validating about her assessment. No qualifiers, no backhanded compliments, just straightforward acknowledgement of my accomplishments. Thank you, I said, the words feeling inadequate for the complex emotions swirling between us. Margaret reached for a small lacquered box on the table beside her. Her hands shook as she opened it, removing a velvet pouch. I have something for you. It belonged to Charlotte. She tipped the contents into her palm. a delicate gold pendant on a fine chain. The pendant was shaped like a compass rose. Charlotte always said she needed no guiding star but her own conscience. It guided her when everyone else, including her mother, failed her. She held it out to me. I hesitated, then accepted it, the metal warm from her hand. I don't expect you to forgive the past, Olivia, or to embrace me as family after one meeting, but I hoped. She paused, gathering herself. I hoped you might be willing to visit again, to learn more about Charlotte, to perhaps consider allowing me to support principled capital in whatever way would be helpful. There it was, money again. The Bennett trap in a different form. I don't need financial support, I said stiffly. Margaret's gaze sharpened. Don't confuse me with whatever disappointments you've faced before, Olivia. I'm not offering charity or trying to buy your affection. I'm offering the investment your venture deserves and would likely pursue from other sources eventually. I've reviewed your business model. It's sound, innovative, and exactly the kind of ethical approach to wealth that the financial world needs. Her directness caught me off guard. This was not the manipulative maneuvering I'd grown accustomed to with the Bennetts. This was honest evaluation. Why would you invest in a company you've just learned about? Because I'm Charlotte's daughter? Because it's a good investment, she corrected firmly. The fact that you're Charlotte's daughter means I learned about it at all. The fact that you've built something so aligned with real human values, rather than just profit, that reminds me of her. But I don't make business decisions based on sentimentality, Olivia. Neither, I suspect, do you. For the first time since entering the room, I felt a flicker of connection with this straight-talking woman. Perhaps we shared more than just genetics. I need to think about it, I said finally. All of it. This is a lot to process. Margaret nodded. Of course. You know where to find me. For now, at least. She gestured toward the pendant in my hand. That's yours regardless, as is the truth about your mother. What you do with either is entirely your choice. As Daniel Calloway walked me to the door an hour later, my mind was spinning with revelations. Charlotte Hayes, the young woman, in the photographs, had wanted me, had fought for me, had died trying to create a life for us. It changed nothing about my past, yet somehow changed everything about how I saw myself. Ms. Hayes, Calloway said as we reached the front porch. There's one more thing Margaret asked me to tell you. Something she felt might be too much to discuss in person today. I braced myself for yet another revelation. What is it? Margaret's estate planning. Beyond any potential investment in your company, she has named you her heir. The house, her personal assets, her investment portfolio, all of it will come to you. I stared at him. I can't accept that. I just met her today. You're her only living family, he said simply. And regardless of whether you choose to build a relationship with her in the time she has left, Margaret is determined to right what she sees as the greatest wrong of her life, letting her granddaughter go without a fight. He handed me his card. Take some time, think it through, but don't wait too long to decide about visiting again. Margaret's good days are becoming fewer. The taxi ride back to my hotel passed in a blur. I clutched Charlotte's compass pendant, trying to orient myself in a world that had suddenly shifted on its axis. I had come to Atlanta seeking answers about my past. Instead, I had found a possible future I never anticipated, one that included family, legacy, and resources beyond anything I had allowed myself to imagine for principled capital. But with that future came complicated questions. Could I accept Margaret's support without compromising the independence I had fought so hard to establish? Could I forgive the grandmother who had failed to fight for me as an infant, even as she fought for me now? And perhaps most disturbingly, what would the Bennetts say when they discovered that their charity case had become the heir to a fortune they knew nothing about? As the Atlanta skyline receded behind me, I realized I was no longer just Olivia Bennett, the adopted daughter perpetually trying to prove her worth. I was no longer just Olivia Hayes, the determined founder of a struggling ethical investment firm. I was the granddaughter of Margaret Hayes, the daughter of Charlotte Hayes, who had defied her family and society to try to keep me. I came from brave, stubborn, imperfect women who made hard choices. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of a real legacy, not one I had to earn through extraordinary effort, but one that was mine by birth, by blood. The very thing the Bennetts had always used to exclude me. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being told I wasn't a real Bennett because blood mattered, I had discovered a bloodline that might change everything. But the real question remained: did I want it to? The flight back to Seattle gave me 5 hours of uninterrupted thinking time, watching clouds drift beneath the wings while I turned the compass pendant over and over in my fingers. By the time we touched down at SeaTac, I had reached no definitive conclusions, but I knew I needed more information before making any decisions about Margaret Hayes and her offer. I threw myself back into work at Principled Capital the next morning, grateful for the familiar routine of market analysis and client calls. My tiny office felt both comforting and constraining after the elegant Hayes home in Atlanta. I found myself studying my reflection in the computer screen during late hours, searching for traces of Charlotte in my features. Did I have her smile? Her determination? The way she tilted her head in those photographs? 3 days after my return, I called Daniel Calloway. "I'd like to learn more about Margaret's investment portfolio," I said, bypassing pleasantries. "And about Charlotte. If Mrs. Hayes is still willing to share that information." "She'll be delighted," Calloway replied, the relief evident in his voice. "She's had good days since your visit. The doctors think seeing you might have given her a psychological boost." I ignored the implied guilt trip. "I'm not making any commitments yet. I just want more information." "Of course. When would you like to schedule your next visit?" "I can't leave Seattle again so soon. I have a business to run." The words came out more defensively than I intended. "Could you send me documents about the Hayes holdings? And—" I hesitated, then pushed forward. "Any letters, journals, or personal effects of Charlotte's that Margaret might be willing to share?" "I'll arrange it immediately," Calloway promised. "And Ms. Hayes? Margaret has asked if you would be open to a video call in the interim, just to talk." My instinct was to refuse, to keep emotional distance while I evaluated the financial implications of this unexpected connection. It was the Bennett way, after all. Analyze, strategize, protect your interests. But I wasn't a Bennett anymore. "Thursday evening," I conceded, after market close. The package from Calloway arrived the following day, a substantial overnight delivery box that I opened after hours in my office. Inside were leather portfolios containing meticulously organized financial documents, investment statements, property deeds, and business holdings. Margaret Hayes, it seemed, was considerably wealthier than her modest home had suggested. The Hayes fortune wasn't flashy new money like the Bennetts. It was old, careful Southern wealth, diversified across real estate, blue-chip stocks, and several privately held companies, including a regional banking group. Conservative, but substantial. Nothing ostentatious, nothing risky, nothing that screamed, "Look at me," but with a total value that made me inhale sharply when I reached the net worth summary. Beneath the financial documents was a smaller box tied with ribbon. A note in elegant handwriting read, "Charlotte's Treasures, M." I set aside the financials and opened this more personal package with unsteady hands. Inside were photographs I hadn't seen at Margaret's house. Charlotte as a child, as a teenager, as a young woman, her graduation portrait from high school, where she stood proudly in cap and gown, her smile radiant. A well-worn journal with entries spanning her senior year of high school through the early months of her pregnancy. A small collection of letters, She had sent home from college before their estrangement. I stayed in the office until dawn, reading my mother's words, tracing the development of her thoughts from ambitious student to defiant, expectant mother. Her handwriting was nothing like mine, looser, more flowing, but her way of thinking, her determination, her analytical approach to problems, these I recognized in myself. The final entry in her journal was dated just 2 weeks before my birth. My daughter kicks so strongly now, she'll be a fighter, like her mother. I've chosen her name, Olivia Margaret, for both her grandmothers. Maybe someday they'll meet her and understand why I couldn't give her up, why I had to try to make this work. I've prepared for every possibility except failure. But if something happens to me, I hope she knows I fought for her until the end. The words blurred as tears fell onto the page. I hastily closed the journal, afraid of damaging this precious link to a woman I would never know. Charlotte Hayes had wanted me fiercely, enough to defy her family, society, and practical considerations. She had named me for the grandmother I had just met, creating a connection that had waited 25 years to be discovered. The day after my deep dive into Charlotte's belongings, I received an unexpected email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, Olivia, urgent family matter. My first thought was that it must be from Margaret or Calloway, but when I opened it, I saw it was from James Bennett, my adoptive brother. Olivia, it read, father has suffered a heart attack. He's stable but asking for you. Whatever has happened between you and the family, please consider coming home. James. I stared at the message, emotions colliding. Home. He still considered Connecticut my home, even after everything. And Charles Bennett was asking for me? The man who had made it abundantly clear I would never be a true part of his legacy? It seemed improbable. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I called the hospital in Connecticut directly and asked about Charles Bennett's condition. The nurse confirmed he had been admitted for a cardiac event, but was indeed stable. Not critical, not fighting for his life, just a man who'd had a health scare. 3 more emails arrived throughout the day, from my mother, from William, even from my Uncle George, all with the same urgent plea for my return, all emphasizing how Charles was asking for me. The coordinated effort felt suspicious. I finally responded to James with a brief message. Glad to hear father is stable. I'm unable to leave Seattle at present due to business commitments. Please keep me updated on his recovery. Cold? Perhaps. But years of Bennett family dynamics had taught me to be wary of sudden emotional appeals. Something wasn't adding up. The answer came the following morning in the form of a business news alert. Bennett Wealth Management faces federal investigation over investment practices. I quickly found the full article. The SEC was investigating several firms, including Bennett Wealth Management, for potential violations related to fee structures and disclosure practices. The allegations weren't criminal, but could result in significant fines and reputational damage. Now, the urgent family summons made more sense. Not Charles Bennett's genuine desire to reconcile with his adopted daughter, but the family's need for a convenient scapegoat or perhaps a sacrificial lamb. I could almost hear the strategy. Session. Bring Olivia back, give her a title and responsibility. Let her take the public fall if things go badly. The timing was almost comical. Just as I discovered my biological family wanted to bring me into a fortune, my adoptive family wanted to drag me into a potential scandal. I didn't respond to any more Bennett messages that day. Instead, I prepared for my scheduled video call with Margaret Hayes. When her face appeared on my screen that evening, I was struck by how much more frail she looked after just a week. The cancer was taking its toll visibly now. You received Charlotte's things? She asked after our initial greetings. Yes, thank you for sharing them with me. They've been waiting for you all these years. Her gaze was direct even through the digital connection. Have you had a chance to review the financial documents as well? I nodded. It's substantial. "Old money," she said with a slight smile. "Not as exciting as what you're probably used to with the Bennetts, but reliable. Conservative. Actually, I appreciate the prudent approach," I admitted. "It aligns more with my own investment philosophy than the Bennett strategy ever did." Something in Margaret's expression shifted, a pleased recognition. "Daniel mentioned you specialize in ethical investing. Charlotte would have approved. She was always concerned with the moral implications of wealth." "I've been thinking about her a lot," I said carefully. "Reading her journal, looking at her photographs. It's strange to feel a connection to someone you've never met." "Not so strange. She's your mother. That connection transcends time and separation." Margaret's voice softened. "She would be proud of you, Olivia. Building your own firm, standing on your principles." The simple acknowledgement, free of qualifiers, expectations, or hidden agendas, hit me harder than I expected. When was the last time someone from the Bennett family had expressed straightforward pride in my accomplishments? "The Bennetts have contacted me," I found myself saying. "My adoptive father had a heart attack. He's fine," I added quickly when concern crossed Margaret's face. "But they're pushing hard for me to return to Connecticut." "Will you go?" "No," I said with more certainty than I had felt before this moment. I suspect their sudden interest in reconciliation has more to do with an SEC investigation than genuine family feeling. Margaret's eyebrows rose. "An investigation? That sounds serious." "It could be, or it could blow over. Either way, I'm not interested in being their convenient solution or their scapegoat." She nodded slowly. "You know, when I first learned the Bennetts had adopted you, I researched them. That was years ago, before I had the means or courage to search for you properly. They seemed like the perfect family on paper. Wealth, social standing, stability. The perfect facade," I corrected. "Like many family legacies, it looks impressive from the outside." "Speaking of legacies," Margaret said, smoothly changing the subject, "have you had any thoughts about my offer regarding principaled capital?" I appreciated her directness. "I'm still considering it. The investment would certainly accelerate our growth, but I've worked hard to build this company independently. I'm wary of complications." "You mean strings," she said bluntly. "You're worried I'll try to control you through financial support, the way the Bennetts did." The accurate assessment startled me into honesty. "Yes, exactly that." Margaret nodded. "A reasonable concern, given your experience. So let me be clear. Any investment I make would be structured however you prefer. Minority stake, silent partner, even a straight loan if that's what you want. I have opinions, Olivia, and decades of business experience, but I have no desire to control principaled capital. It's your vision, your company." "Why?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me. "Why would you offer that kind of support? With so few conditions?" She was quiet for a moment, her expression contemplative. "When you reach my age and face my diagnosis, you gain clarity about what matters. I failed Charlotte when she needed me most. I allowed my husband's pride and my own fear of scandal to take precedence over supporting my daughter. I can't change that now." She paused, taking a labored breath before continuing. "But I can ensure her daughter, you, has every resource needed to succeed on your own terms. Not as obligation or charity, but as investment in what should have been Charlotte's legacy too. Your success honors her memory far more than my regret ever could." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the calculated generosity of the Bennetts, with its hidden expectations and conditional approval. This was something I had rarely encountered in the world of wealth and privilege. Authentic support without the requirement of conformity. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "About all of it. The inheritance, the investment, even whether I'm ready to be Margaret Hayes's granddaughter after a lifetime as Olivia Bennett. "Take the time you need," she replied, "though I should warn you, my timeline is somewhat compressed these days." The slight smile softened the stark reality of her words. After we ended the call, I sat in my darkened office, Charlotte's compass, pendant warm in my palm. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. A daughter trying to find her direction between two family legacies, two possible futures. The following morning brought more urgent messages from the Bennetts, including one from the family lawyer suggesting my expertise would be valuable during this challenging time for the firm. I deleted them all without response. Instead, I immersed myself in work, reviewing client portfolios and finalizing a presentation for a promising potential investor, a tech founder whose values aligned perfectly with Principled Capital's mission. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon, and I needed to be focused. Maya Lynn, my first Seattle client, stopped by unexpectedly around noon. "You look terrible," she announced without preamble. "When was the last time you slept properly?" I laughed despite myself. "Hello? To you too, Maya. Seriously, Olivia, what's going on? You've been distracted for days. Is it the Bennett thing? I saw the news about the SEC investigation." Of course, Maya would have connected the dots. She had become more than a client over the past months, perhaps the closest thing to a friend I had in Seattle. "Partially," I admitted, "but it's more complicated than that." Over lunch at the small cafe downstairs, I gave her the condensed version, meeting Margaret, learning about Charlotte, the unexpected inheritance, and the competing demands from my two families. "So let me get this straight," Maya said when I finished. "You grew up with a wealthy family that never fully accepted you, left to build your own company, and now you've discovered you're the heir to a second fortune from a grandmother you never knew existed. Meanwhile, your adoptive family is suddenly desperate for you to come back just as they're facing an investigation." She shook her head in disbelief. "That's either karma or a Lifetime movie plot." "It feels surreal," I admitted. "A month ago, I was just focused on keeping principled. Capital a flot. Now I'm fielding calls from two different family lawyers on opposite sides of the country. What are you going to do about Margaret's offer? The investment could transform Principled Capital." I traced the rim of my coffee cup, considering. "That's what worries me. I built this company as a direct rejection of the Bennett approach to wealth management. What if accepting Margaret's money changes that somehow? What if it changes me?" Maya gave me a skeptical look. "How exactly would having proper funding change your core values? You're not compromising your investment philosophy. You're not changing your client approach. You're just getting the resources to do what you already believe in, but better." Put that way, it did sound like a simple decision. But 25 years of Bennett conditioning had left me wary of financial support. That came with family ties. "I need to be sure I'm making this decision for the right reasons," I said. "Not out of rebellion against the Bennetts or emotional reaction to finding my birth family." "Fair enough," Maya conceded. "But don't overthink this into paralysis. Sometimes the right choice is also the obvious one." As I prepared for my afternoon meeting, Maya's pragmatic perspective stayed with me. She was right that Principled Capital's mission wouldn't fundamentally change with better funding. If anything, proper capitalization would allow me to expand our ethical investing approach to more clients, making a greater positive impact. The potential investor meeting went exceptionally well. Jason Cho, founder of a successful green technology startup, connected immediately with Principled Capital's mission. By the end of our discussion, he was ready to transfer a significant portfolio to our management. "Your approach is exactly what I've been looking for," he said as we wrapped up. "Most firms pretend to care about ethical considerations, but when you dig into their actual investments, it's all surface-level greenwashing. You're the real deal." His words stayed with me as I walked back to my apartment that evening. The real deal. Wasn't that what I had been seeking all my life? To be authentic in a world of carefully constructed appearances? The Bennetts had mastered the art of looking perfect while harboring deeply flawed values. I had left to build something genuine, only to discover I came from another lineage altogether, one that might actually align with the person I was trying to become. That night, I made two decisions. First, I called Daniel Calloway and asked him to prepare investment documents for Margaret Hayes to become a minority shareholder in Principled Capital, with clear provisions protecting the company's ethical investment mandate and my decision-making authority. Second, I drafted a formal response to the Bennett family lawyer, making it unequivocally clear that I would not be returning to Connecticut or involving myself in their SEC issues. I explained that while I wished Charles Bennett a full recovery, I had established my own professional identity separate from Bennett Wealth Management and intended to maintain that separation. The email from William Bennett arrived minutes after I sent my response to their lawyer. The subject line read, "You ungrateful bitch." I almost didn't open it, knowing it would contain nothing constructive, but curiosity won out. "After everything this family has done for you," it began, "this is how you repay us? We gave you our name, our home, every advantage money could buy. Now when father needs you, when the company is facing a crisis, you turn your back? You were always selfish, always the outsider playing the victim. Maybe it's for the best. You never were a real Bennett anyway." I read it twice, waiting for the familiar sting of rejection, the pain of exclusion that had been my constant companion growing up. But surprisingly, it didn't come. Instead, I felt something unexpected: relief. William was right about one thing. I never was a real Bennett, and for the first time in my life, that felt like a blessing rather than a curse. I didn't respond to his email. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting a new business plan for Principled Capital's expansion with Margaret's investment. The future suddenly felt full of possibilities that had nothing to do with proving my worth to a family that had never truly wanted me. The following morning, I received a call from Daniel Calloway. The urgency in his voice immediately put me on alert. "Olivia, I think you should come to Atlanta as soon as possible. Margaret's condition has worsened significantly in the past 24 hours. Her doctors are suggesting—" He paused, his professional composure slipping. "They're suggesting you might want to say goodbye in person." I felt a strange hollowness in my chest, grief for someone I had barely begun to know. "I'll be on the next flight." As I hurriedly packed a small suitcase, my phone rang again. The Connecticut area code made me hesitate, but something compelled me to answer. "Olivia Bennett?" An unfamiliar male voice. "Yes? Who's calling?" "Ms. Bennett, this is Agent Pearson with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We're investigating certain practices at Bennett Wealth Management, and we have reason to believe you might have information relevant to our inquiry. Would you be willing to answer some questions?" The timing was almost too perfect, or too terrible. As I rushed to say goodbye to the grandmother I'd just found, the past I'd tried to leave behind was reaching out with official tentacles. "I haven't worked at Bennett Wealth Management for over a year," I said cautiously. "I'm not sure what information I could provide." "Our investigation covers activities dating back 3 years," Agent Pearson replied. "During which time you were employed there, correct?" "Yes, but in a limited capacity. I was never involved in setting fee structures or disclosure policies. Nevertheless, your perspective could be valuable. Would you be available to speak with us later this week?" I thought of Margaret, possibly in her final days, of the Bennetts scrambling to protect themselves, of my own fledgling company poised at a crossroads. "I'm dealing with a family emergency right now," I said truthfully. "I'll be out of town for at least a few days. After that, yes, I'll cooperate however I can." As I hung up, the irony of the situation hit me full force. After years of being told I wasn't really family by the Bennetts, I was rushing across the country for a woman I had met only once, connected by blood but virtually strangers. Meanwhile, the real family that had raised me was potentially implicated in financial improprieties they might have expected me to help shield them from. The compass pendant seemed to burn against my skin as I called for a taxi to the airport. Charlotte Hayes had named me for both my grandmothers, creating a bridge between worlds that had taken 25 years to cross. Now, as I flew toward one grandmother's deathbed, I carried the weight of the other family's legacy and its potential downfall. The Bennett name had never felt heavier, nor my determination to reclaim my true identity as Olivia Hayes stronger. The Atlanta airports hummed with activity as I rushed through the terminal, carrying only my hastily packed overnight bag. Daniel Calloway had arranged for a car to meet me, and I slid into the back seat with a brief greeting to the driver, my mind already at Margaret's bedside. "How is she?" I asked Daniel when he called to confirm I had landed. "Holding on," he replied, his typically measured voice tight with emotion. "The doctors are surprised, actually. They think she's waiting for you." The concept was both touching and terrifying. The responsibility of being someone's final anchor to this world when we had shared so little time together. What could I possibly mean to Margaret Hayes after just one meeting? Yet the urgency in Daniel's voice suggested I meant everything. The Hayes home looked different in the fading afternoon light, more fragile somehow, as if the house itself sensed its owner's decline. A nurse met me at the door, her expression professionally compassionate. "She's been asking for you," she said, leading me through the now familiar hallway. "She's lucid, but very weak. Try not to tire her." Margaret's bedroom was dimly lit, medical equipment creating an incongruous hospital atmosphere in the elegant space. She looked impossibly small against the pillows, her once commanding presence diminished by pain and medication. But when she saw me, her eyes brightened with the same sharp intelligence I remembered. "You came," she whispered, lifting a trembling hand. I moved to her bedside, taking her fragile fingers in mine. "Of course I came." "Sit." She gestured weakly to the chair beside her bed. Not much time for formalities now. I sat, still, holding her hand, searching for appropriate words. "What do you say to someone you've just begun to know when they're slipping away?" "Daniel has the papers?" she asked, her focus surprisingly businesslike despite her condition. "Yes, the investment in principal capital is arranged, but that's not important right now." "It is important," she insisted with a flash of her former strength. "Your future is important, Olivia. Charlotte's legacy." "I know about the inheritance," I said gently. "Daniel explained everything. You don't need to worry about the details now." She shook her head slightly, frustrated by my misunderstanding. "Not talking about money, talking about purpose." Her breathing was labored, each word an effort. Charlotte understood. Values matter more than wealth. How you use it matters. "I understand," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely sure I did. Her gaze intensified. "The Bennetts? They're in trouble?" The question surprised me. "How did you know?" A ghost of a smile. "Old habits. Had Daniel check when you mentioned SEC. Serious allegations. Even dying, Margaret Hayes was thorough in her intelligence gathering. I could see where my analytical tendencies might have come from, not just Charlotte's academic brilliance, but her mother's strategic mind. Yes, it appears serious. They want me to come back, to help somehow." "Will you?" No judgment in the question, just genuine curiosity. "No," I said with certainty. "That chapter of my life is closed." She nodded slightly, apparently satisfied. "Good. Know your worth." We sat in silence for a few moments, the medical equipment beeping softly in the background. I realized I had so many questions I still wanted to ask. About her life, about Charlotte's childhood, about the family, history I had never known. But Margaret's energy was clearly waning, her eyelids growing heavy. "Rest," I urged. "I'll be here when you wake up." "No." Her fingers tightened on mine with surprising strength. "Need to tell you. The letters." "Charlotte's letters?" I read them. "Not those. In my study. Bottom drawer of desk. Password to safe is Charlotte's birthday." Her words were becoming more disjointed, her breathing more labored. "Important you understand. Everything." "I will," I promised, though I had no idea what she was referring to. "Don't worry about anything now." Her eyes closed briefly, then opened again with visible effort. "Sorry," she whispered. "Sorry it took so long to find you." "You found me," I assured her, throat tight with unexpected emotion. "That's what matters." "Be the Hayes you were meant to be," she murmured, her voice fading. "Not what anyone else wants. What Charlotte would have." Her words trailed off as she slipped into unconsciousness. The nurse stepped forward, checking monitors and adjusting medication. "She needs to rest now," she said quietly. "This happens. Moments of clarity, then sleep. You should get some rest yourself. There's a guest room prepared." I reluctantly released Margaret's hand and left the room, emotionally exhausted, yet restless. Instead of seeking the guest room, I found myself drawn to Margaret's study, a room I hadn't entered during my previous visit. It was a beautiful space, lined with bookshelves and dominated by an antique mahogany desk. Everything was meticulously organized, reflecting the ordered mind of its owner. I hesitated only briefly before opening the bottom drawer she had mentioned. Inside was a folder labeled simply, "Bennett Adoption." My heart raced as I lifted it onto the desk and opened it. The contents were not what I expected, not personal mementos or photographs, but legal documents, correspondence between attorneys, and what appeared to be private investigator reports dating back over 20 years. Margaret Hayes had not just recently begun searching for me. She had started looking almost immediately after Charlotte's death, only to be repeatedly blocked by legal maneuvers and confidentiality agreements. The trail went cold for years, then picked up again after her husband's death when she had full control of family resources. What stunned me most was a letter from the adoption agency to Douglas Hayes, dated just weeks after my birth. It acknowledged his inquiry about his granddaughter and informed him that while they couldn't reveal my specific placement, they could confirm I was in the care of a prestigious East Coast family who would provide every advantage. Douglas Hayes had asked about me, had known about me, had even made initial inquiries, contrary to Margaret's belief that he had been completely opposed to finding me. More disturbing were the reports about the Bennetts themselves. Discreet investigations into their business practices, their treatment of employees, their reputation in the financial industry. Margaret had been researching not just my whereabouts, but the character of the family raising me, apparently concerned by what she discovered long before the current SEC investigation. A sealed envelope marked, "For Olivia, when found," sat at the bottom of the folder. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside was a letter in Margaret's elegant handwriting, dated 5 years earlier. "To my granddaughter, whom I have yet to meet. If you are reading this, then my search has finally succeeded, though perhaps too late for us to truly know each other. There are truths you must understand about your adoption, truths I've only recently discovered myself. Your mother, Charlotte, never intended for you to be adopted. When she died, you should have come to me, your grandmother. Douglas and I were your legal next of kin. But powerful interests intervened, specifically, Elizabeth Bennett. What I've learned through years of investigation is troubling. Elizabeth Bennett had been told she could not conceive a daughter after her sons were born. She became fixated on adopting a female child from a good family, one with the right genetic background, intelligence, and appearance to complement the Bennett image. When she learned of Charlotte's situation through social connections, she saw an opportunity. The Bennett's wealth and influence ensured that normal adoption protocols were expedited. Douglas's initial inquiries were deliberately misdirected. By the time I learned what had happened, the adoption was finalized under unusually secretive terms. I tell you this not to disturb your peace, but because you deserve to know the truth. You were not randomly placed with the Bennetts. You were specifically selected by them, particularly by Elizabeth, to fulfill a role in their family narrative. You were never meant to be their equal, only their accessory. It is my deepest regret that I did not fight harder, that I allowed Douglas's grief and pride to silence my instincts. Whatever relationship you have with the Bennetts now, please know that you were always meant to be a Hayes. You were wanted, loved, and should have been with us all along. With hope that someday you'll read these words, your grandmother, Margaret Hayes. I sat motionless, the letter clutched in my hands. The revelation cast my entire childhood in a new and disturbing light. I wasn't just an adopted child the Bennetts had never fully embraced. I was a deliberately acquired asset, selected for specific qualities that would enhance their family. Image, never intended to have true equality with James and William. Elizabeth Bennett's cool distance, her constant critical assessment of my appearance and behavior, her insistence that I should be grateful for the Bennett name. All of it made a terrible new kind of sense. She hadn't wanted a daughter She had wanted a female showpiece for her perfect family portrait. I was still reeling from these revelations when Daniel Calloway found me in the study. "Olivia," he said gently, "I think you should come back to Margaret's room. The doctors say it won't be long now." I gathered the documents, tucking Margaret's letter into my pocket, and followed him back to the bedroom. Margaret's breathing had become shallow, her skin taking on a waxy pallor. The nurse nodded solemnly as we entered, confirming without words what Daniel had said. I took my place beside the bed, holding Margaret's limp hand. Her eyes remained closed, but when I spoke, her fingers twitched slightly in recognition. "I found the letters," I told her softly. "I understand now. Whether she heard me or not, I'll never know for certain. But I like to think the slight relaxation of her features was acknowledgement, perhaps even relief that her final mission was complete. I had the truth at last. Margaret Hayes passed away at 3:17 a.m., with her newly found granddaughter by her side. Despite our brief acquaintance, I felt her loss profoundly, not just for what we might have shared, but for what had been kept from both of us for 25 years. The days that followed passed in a blur of legal meetings, funeral arrangements, and quiet grief. Daniel Calloway guided me through the complex process of settling Margaret's estate, explaining that she had updated her will immediately after our first meeting to expedite the transfer of assets. She was very methodical, he explained as we sat in his office reviewing documents. Even knowing her time was limited, she wanted everything properly structured for your benefit, both personally and for principaled capital. The inheritance was substantial. The Hayes family home, investment portfolios, shares in several private companies, and liquid assets that dwarfed my modest savings. More significant than the money, however, was the weight of legacy that came with it, a family history I was only beginning to understand. "There's something else," Daniel said, sliding a small box across his desk. "Margaret asked me to give you this once everything was official." Inside was a signet ring bearing the Hayes family crest, a simple yet elegant design featuring a compass rose similar to Charlotte's pendant. "It was Charlotte's," Daniel explained. "She left it behind the night she left home. Margaret kept it all these years, hoping to give it to her daughter again someday. When that became impossible, she wanted her granddaughter to have it." I slipped the ring onto my finger, surprised by how right it felt, like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. "What will you do now?" Daniel asked. "Will you stay in Atlanta to manage the Hayes holdings?" It was a logical question. The various businesses and properties would require attention, and much of the Hayes wealth was tied to Georgia. The practical choice would be to relocate, to embrace this new identity and legacy fully. But as I twisted the unfamiliar ring on my finger, I realized the answer wasn't about practicality. "No," I said with certainty. "Seattle is where I've built principled capital, where I've begun to define myself on my own terms. I'll manage the Hayes interests from there, with your help for the local matters." Daniel nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Margaret suspected you'd say that. She admired your independence, said it reminded her of Charlotte." Independence. The word resonated. For the first time in my life, I was truly independent. Financially, emotionally, even in terms of identity. I was neither a Bennett seeking approval, nor a Hayes trying to reclaim lost connections. I was simply Olivia, with the freedom to define myself beyond any family name. As I prepared to return to Seattle, there was one final piece of unfinished business. The SEC investigator Agent Pearson had called twice during my time in Atlanta, increasingly interested in speaking with me about Bennett Wealth Management. I arranged a video meeting from Daniel's office, providing what limited information I could about my time at the firm. I had never been involved in setting fee structures or client disclosures, the areas under investigation, but I did share my observations about the corporate culture and decision-making processes. "So, to clarify," Agent Pearson said, "you believe William and James Bennett were directly involved in approving all fee structures for high-net-worth clients, even though officially that responsibility fell to the compliance department?" "Yes," I confirmed. Nothing significant happened at Bennett Wealth Management without their explicit approval, especially anything involving the firm's most valuable client relationships. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply telling the truth, something the Bennetts had never valued as highly as appearances. The call ended with Agent Pearson thanking me for my cooperation and indicating they might have additional questions. As the investigation progressed, I felt no satisfaction, no vindictive pleasure at the Bennett's potential downfall. Only a quiet relief that I was no longer entangled in their web of image maintenance and moral compromises. My final evening in Atlanta, I visited Charlotte's grave for the first time. Margaret had been buried beside her daughter in the Hayes family plot, their headstones simple yet elegant. I placed fresh flowers on both graves, feeling the strange weight of connection to two women I had barely known, one I had never met at all, yet whose blood ran in my veins. "I wish we'd had the chance," I said softly, uncertain whether I was speaking to Charlotte, Margaret, or both. "But I'll carry forward what you both valued. I promise." As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "It's Elizabeth Bennett. We need to talk, urgently." I stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions rising within me. After everything I had learned from Margaret's documents, the idea of speaking to Elizabeth Bennett, the woman who had handpicked me as a status symbol, then spent 25 years subtly undermining my sense of belonging, filled me with a cold anger I had never allowed myself to acknowledge before. My first instinct was to block the number without responding, to cut the final thread, connecting me to the Bennett family. But as I stood between the graves of my birth mother and grandmother, I realized there was one conversation left to have. Not for the Bennett's benefit, but for my own closure. I typed a brief reply. "I'll be back in Seattle tomorrow. You can reach me at my office." The flight back to Seattle gave me time to prepare mentally for whatever Elizabeth Bennett might want. The SEC investigation was the obvious concern. Perhaps they hoped I would provide favorable testimony or withhold damaging information. Or maybe, with Charles still recovering from his heart attack, she was making one final attempt to pull me back into the fold to help manage the crisis. Either way, I was no longer the eager-to-please adopted daughter desperate for scraps of Bennett approval. I was Olivia Hayes, CEO of Principled Capital and heir to the Hayes family fortune. The balance of power had shifted completely. Maya was waiting at the airport when I landed, her familiar face a welcome sight after the emotional intensity of Atlanta. "You look different," she observed as we walked to her car. "More. I don't know. Centered?" "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I've finally found solid ground." Over dinner at my apartment, I shared the full story: Margaret's passing, the inheritance, and most significantly, the revelations about my adoption. "So, Elizabeth Bennett specifically selected you?" Maya said, visibly disturbed. "Like, what? Shopping for a designer baby?" "Essentially," I confirmed. According to Margaret's investigation, Elizabeth had social connections to the hospital where Charlotte died. When she learned about an infant girl from good stock, suddenly available for adoption, she made sure the Bennetts were at the front of the line. "That's seriously messed up," Maya said, shaking her head. "And now she wants to talk. After everything?" "Tomorrow morning," I confirmed, "at my office. Want me to be there? As moral support or witness or whatever?" I considered the offer. "No, but thank you. This is something I need to handle myself." "Just remember, you're not that desperate to belong girl anymore," Maya reminded me. "You're Olivia freaking Hayes, financial badass with 2 family fortunes and a successful company you built from scratch." I laughed, grateful for her perspective. "I'll try to remember that." The next morning, I arrived at the Principal Capital office early, taking time to center myself before Elizabeth's visit. I wore the Hayes signet ring and Charlotte's compass pendant, physical reminders of who I truly was and where I came from. When my assistant announced Elizabeth Bennett's arrival, I was ready. She entered my office with the same regal bearing. I remembered, though stress had etched new lines around her eyes. Her designer suit and perfect coiffure stood in stark contrast to my more modern, understated style. For a moment, she surveyed my modest office space, a flicker of something like disappointment crossing her features. "Olivia," she said, extending her hand as if we were business acquaintances rather than family. "Thank you for seeing me." "Mrs. Bennett," I replied, deliberately using the formal address as I briefly shook her hand. "Please, have a seat." If my coolness surprised her, she didn't show it. She sat across from me, perfectly poised as always. "I'll come directly to the point," she said. "The situation at Bennett Wealth Management has become untenable. The SEC investigation, Charles's health issues, and frankly, poor decision-making by your brothers have created a perfect storm." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said neutrally. "But I'm not sure how this concerns me." She met my gaze directly. "We need you to come back, Olivia. Not just for appearances or family loyalty, but because you're genuinely the most qualified person to help navigate this crisis." "The most qualified?" I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. That's quite a change from not a real Bennett, with no instinct for the business. A flicker of discomfort crossed her face. Things were said in the heat of the moment that were unfortunate. But this is bigger than past disagreements. The firm your father built. Charles Bennett is not my father, I interrupted calmly. Not biologically, and as he made abundantly clear, not in any meaningful emotional sense either. Elizabeth stiffened. "We raised you, Olivia, gave you every advantage." "Yes, you did. After specifically selecting me as the perfect female, accessory for the Bennett family image." Her expression froze. "What are you talking about?" "I know about the adoption, Elizabeth. All of it. How you learned about Charlotte Hayes' death. How you used your connections to ensure you got her infant daughter before her own family could claim me. How you deliberately kept my grandmother from finding me for 25 years. The color drained from Elizabeth's face. "Who told you these fabrications?" "Margaret Hayes," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "My biological grandmother. She had quite thorough documentation." For perhaps the first time in my life, I saw Elizabeth Bennett truly rattled. Her perfect composure cracked, revealing a glimpse of panic beneath. "Margaret Hayes contacted you?" she asked, her voice slightly higher than normal. "When? How?" "She found me recently," I said, not elaborating on the details. "We spent time together before she passed away last week." "Passed away?" Elizabeth echoed, seeming genuinely surprised. Then, recovering slightly, "I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" I asked quietly. "You spent decades ensuring I never knew her, that I never knew Charlotte or anything about my biological family. Why would you care that I've lost her now?" Elizabeth's gaze dropped to her perfectly manicured hands. "It was a different time, Olivia. The adoption was handled according to the practices of the day." "The practices of the day didn't include deliberately hiding a child from her legal next of kin," I countered, "or selecting that child specifically for her genetic background and appearance to complete your perfect family portrait." "You don't understand," she said, a hint of desperation entering her voice. "After James and William, the doctors said I couldn't have more children. Certainly not a daughter. I had always wanted a daughter." "Wanted a daughter or wanted a living doll to dress up and display?" I asked. "Because from my experience, you never actually treated me like your daughter. I was a project, an outsider you constantly reminded didn't truly belong." "That's not fair," she protested, but weakly. "No, it wasn't fair. None of it was fair. But we're not here to discuss fairness, are we? We're here because Bennett Wealth Management is in trouble, and suddenly the adopted daughter you all dismissed is valuable again." Elizabeth straightened, regaining some of her composure. "Whatever you may think of the past, the fact remains that Bennett Wealth Management is your legacy, too. You spent years there. Your clients trusted you. Do you really want to see it all collapse?" "My legacy?" I repeated incredulously. "You and Charles made it abundantly clear that the Bennett legacy belonged to James and William. That blood mattered above all else." "Perhaps we were wrong," she conceded, the words clearly difficult for her. "Your performance, your client relationships, your ethical standards, these proved more valuable than we acknowledged. And now that those ethical standards might help with an SEC investigation, you've had a convenient change of heart." Elizabeth's lips thinned. "The investigation is a misunderstanding. Regulatory overreach. With the right management team in place, including you, we can weather this storm." I studied her, seeing clearly for the first time the calculation behind her every word and gesture. Elizabeth Bennett had never done anything without strategic purpose, including adopting me. "I'm not coming back," I said finally. "Bennett Wealth Management is no longer my concern. I have my own firm now, my own clients who trust my ethical approach precisely because it's different from the Bennett model." "Olivia, be reasonable. This small operation," she gestured dismissively around my office, "can't possibly provide the security or prestige of the Bennett name." I smiled slightly, fingering the Hayes signet ring on my finger. "I don't need the Bennett name anymore, Elizabeth. I've reclaimed my own." Her gaze sharpened as she noticed the ring for the first time. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I legally changed my name back to Hayes. And as for security," I continued calmly, "Margaret left me, her entire estate. The Hayes family may not be as flashy as the Bennetts, but their wealth is considerable, and notably, not currently under SEC investigation." Elizabeth paled visibly. "She left you. Everything. You've only just met her. Blood matters? Isn't that what you and Charles always said? Turns out you were right, just not in the way you meant." For a long moment, Elizabeth sat in stunned silence, her world visibly realigning before my eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "So, this is your revenge? Let Bennett Wealth Management collapse while you enjoy your newfound Hayes fortune?" "This isn't about revenge," I said truthfully. It's about choices and consequences. The Bennetts made their choices long ago. About me, about how to conduct business, about what values matter. Now you're facing the consequences. That's not revenge, it's just reality. Elizabeth stood abruptly. You were never grateful, not for anything we gave you. That's where you're wrong, I replied, remaining seated. I'm grateful for the education, for the opportunities, even for the harsh lessons about what truly matters in life. But most of all, I'm grateful to finally understand why I never felt like I belonged in your home, because I wasn't meant to belong there. I was meant to be a Hayes all along. She gathered her designer purse, her movements stiff with suppressed emotion. At the door, she paused, turning back with one final barb. You think finding your real family changes anything? Margaret Hayes is dead. Charlotte Hayes is dead. You're still alone, Olivia. At least with us. You had a name that meant something in this world. I touched the compass pendant at my throat, feeling strangely calm in the face of her attempt to wound me. I have more than a name now, Elizabeth. I have the truth. And that's worth everything. After she left, I sat quietly in my office, absorbing the finality of the encounter. The last thread connecting me to the Bennetts had been severed, not by their rejection this time, but by my choice. The freedom was dizzying. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. How did it go with Mama Bennett? I smiled at her nickname. For Elizabeth. It's over, I replied simply. All of it. Good, came her immediate response. Now the real Olivia Hayes can finally shine. The real Olivia Hayes. After 25 years of trying to be someone else's idea of who I should be, I was finally free to discover exactly who that was. And whatever challenges lay ahead, managing the Hayes estate, growing principled capital, perhaps someday building a family of my own, I would face them as myself, not as anyone's accessory or afterthought. For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking approval or belonging. I had found something far more valuable, the truth of my own worth, independent of any family name. 6 months passed like a whirlwind. Spring bloomed into summer, and Seattle's perpetual rain gave way to perfect mild days that made the city sparkle. Principled Capital had moved into a new office space, nothing ostentatious, but considerably more impressive than my original converted warehouse room. The staff had grown to 11 people, each carefully selected not just for their financial acumen, but for their commitment to our ethical investment philosophy. The Hayes inheritance had changed everything and nothing, while the financial security allowed Principled Capital to expand more rapidly than I had initially planned. I remained committed to the core mission that had driven me to start the firm in the first place. We still specialized in ethical investments, still prioritized sustainability and social responsibility over maximum short-term returns. The difference was that now we had the resources to truly compete with larger firms, including Bennett Wealth Management. Not that the Bennetts were much competition these days. The SEC investigation had resulted in substantial fines and a devastating blow to their reputation. Charles had been forced to step down as CEO during his recovery from the heart attack. William had taken over temporarily but proved woefully unprepared for leadership during a crisis. Clients were leaving in droves, many seeking financial advisors, with more transparent practices and ethical standards. I took no pleasure in their downfall, but I couldn't deny a certain poetic justice in watching a firm that had prided itself on appearance over substance now facing the consequences of that misplaced priority. The Bennett name, once so powerful, in financial circles, had become associated with outdated practices and questionable ethics. Another former Bennett client called today, Maya reported, dropping into the chair across from my desk. She had officially joined Principled Capital 3 months ago, bringing her startup connections and refreshing directness to our management team. That makes 7 this month. Did you take the meeting? I asked, setting aside the quarterly projections I'd been reviewing. Scheduled for tomorrow, but honestly, Olivia, we're going to need more advisors if this keeps up. We can't maintain our standards with the current staff-to-client ratio. She was right, of course. Success brought its own challenges, and rapid growth could threaten the personalized service that differentiated us from larger firms. Start interviewing, I decided, but be extremely selective. I'd rather turn away clients than compromise on our team quality. Maya grinned. Yes, boss. Though it still feels weird to hear you giving orders instead of just doing everything yourself. I smiled, acknowledging the truth in her observation. Learning to delegate had been one of my biggest challenges over the past months. After years of trying to prove my worth through constant work and self-sacrifice, adjusting to a leadership role where I empowered others rather than doing it all myself required a significant mental shift. Speaking of not doing everything yourself, Maya continued, Daniel Calloway called while you were in your morning meeting. Something about the Atlanta property? The Hayes family home remained unsold, despite multiple attractive offers. I had visited twice since Margaret's passing, each time intending to make final decisions about the property and its contents. Each time, I found myself unable to sign the papers, postponing the inevitable without fully understanding why. I should call him back, I said, making a note. The developer's deadline is this Friday. Or, Maya suggested carefully, you could consider keeping it. I looked up, surprised. The Atlanta house? Why would I? I live here. My business is here. People can have more than one home, Olivia, especially people who inherit family estates along with considerable fortunes. It's not practical, I objected. I can't maintain an empty house across the country. Maybe practicality isn't the point, Maya said, unusually philosophical. That house is your only tangible connection to Charlotte and Margaret. Maybe some part of you isn't ready to let that go. Her insight was uncomfortably accurate. Despite my rational arguments for selling the property, something kept holding me back. A sense that I was still learning who the Hayes women were, still discovering what it meant to be one of them. Selling the house felt like closing a book I had barely begun to read. I'll think about it, I conceded. After Maya left, I didn't immediately return to my projections. Instead, I opened my desk drawer and removed the small photo album I'd compiled from Charlotte's belongings. Images of my mother from childhood through her college years, culminating in one precious photo of her visibly pregnant, smiling directly at the camera with one hand resting protectively over her belly. Over me. I was still studying that image when my assistant buzzed to announce an unexpected visitor. "There's a James Bennett here to see you," she said, sounding uncertain. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent." James. Of all the Bennetts, he had always been the least openly hostile toward me, though he had never actually defended me either. Always the peacekeeper, the one who avoided conflict by avoiding taking sides. Send him in, I decided, curious, despite myself. James looked both familiar and foreign as he entered my office, the same tall Bennett build and confident posture, but with new lines of stress aging his once boyish face. He wore an expensive suit that somehow seemed to hang differently on his frame, as if he had lost weight or perhaps just presence. "Olivia," he greeted me, hesitating by the door. "Thank you for seeing me." "James," I acknowledged, not rising from my desk. "This is unexpected." "I was in Seattle for a conference," he explained, approaching cautiously. I thought we should talk." "About what?" I kept my tone neutral, neither welcoming nor dismissive. He gestured to the chair across from me. I nodded, watching as he sat with the careful movements of someone entering potentially hostile territory. "You've done well for yourself," he observed, glancing around the office. "Principled capital is generating quite a buzz in the industry." "Thank you." But I doubt you came to offer congratulations. James sighed, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from our childhood. No, I suppose not. Though your success is genuinely impressive. He paused, seemingly gathering his thoughts. I owe you an apology, Olivia. Many apologies, actually. But we have to start somewhere. Of all the things I had expected from this visit, a genuine apology wasn't among them. James had always been the diplomatic Bennett, skilled at smoothing over tensions without actually addressing their causes. For what, specifically? I asked, unwilling to make this easy for him. For not standing up for you, he said simply. All those years when father and mother and William marginalized you, made you feel less than, I said nothing, did nothing. I knew it was wrong, but I took the path of least resistance. The frank admission caught me off guard. Why now? I asked. After all this time? He looked down at his hands. The firm is failing, Olivia. You probably already know that. The SEC fines, the client exodus, father's health issues. It's all coming apart. So this visit is about saving Bennett Wealth Management after all, I concluded, disappointment settling in my chest. Just like Mother's attempt. No, he insisted, looking up with unexpected intensity. This isn't about the firm. I'm leaving Bennett Wealth Management. That genuinely surprised me. You're… what? Resigning, next week. I've accepted a position with Goldman's Sustainable Investment Division. I'm starting over. You're leaving the family business? I couldn't quite process it. James had always been the dutiful son, the one who unquestioningly accepted his place in the Bennett legacy. The family business left me, he said with a wry smile. Or rather, what I thought it stood for. When the SEC investigation revealed the extent of the ethical corners that had been cut over the years, decisions, Father and William made that I was kept partially in the dark about, I realized I didn't want that legacy anymore. I studied him, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. What about William? And your parents? James grimaced. William blames everyone but himself. The SEC, our compliance team, the changing market. Mother is focused entirely on social damage control. And father. He trailed off, shaking his head. Father is not the man I thought he was. Learning what I have about his business practices, his decisions, it's been disillusioning. Welcome to disillusionment, I said dryly. I reached that point years ago. I know, he acknowledged. And I should have listened to you then. Your ethical concerns about some of our investment strategies, your push for more transparency. You saw the problems before any of us admitted they existed. The validation, coming years too late, felt strangely hollow. I had long since stopped needing Bennett approval to know my own worth. I appreciate you saying that, James. But why are you really here? He met my gaze directly. Because I need to understand how you did it. How you walked away from everything you knew and built something new. Something better. I hadn't expected that question, nor the vulnerability behind it. James Bennett, the golden son, asking me, the perpetual outsider, for guidance. It wasn't easy, I said after a moment. I had nothing but my education and determination when I left. No clients, no connections I was willing to leverage, barely enough savings to rent that first tiny office. But you did it anyway, he pressed. You took that leap. I didn't have much choice. The Bennetts made it clear I would never be truly accepted, never be trusted with real authority or respect. He winced. I know, and I'm sorry I was part of that. But even without the family rejection pushing you out, you had the courage to envision something different, to build according to your own values rather than inherited ones. I considered his words, realizing that beneath the apology lay a more personal request. James wasn't just here to make amends. He was looking for a blueprint for his own reinvention. "It's different for you," I pointed out. "You're a Bennett by blood. That identity is part of you in a way it never was for me." "Maybe that's why it's harder," he admitted. "I've never known who I am outside of that name, that predetermined path." For the first time, I felt a flicker of genuine empathy for James. While I had struggled with exclusion and conditional acceptance, he had faced a different challenge. Expectations so ingrained that they had prevented him from developing his own identity, separate from the Bennett legacy. "Start with what you actually value," I advised, surprising myself with the genuine desire to help. "Not what you were told to value. Build from there, even if it's uncomfortable at first." He nodded slowly. "That's what I admired about Principled. Capital from the beginning. You built it on actual values, not just profit margins and growth targets." The acknowledgement that he had been paying attention to my career even after I left was unexpected. "It wasn't just about ethics," I explained. "It was about authenticity, building something that reflected who I really am, not who someone else wanted me to be." "I think that's what I'm trying to do now," James said quietly. "Figure out who I really am when I'm not just Charles Bennett's son and heir." We sat in silence for a moment, the years of family history between us shifting into something neither of us had anticipated. A kind of understanding rooted not in shared blood, but in shared human experience. "Olivia," James said finally, "I know we can't erase the past. And I'm not asking to be part of your life now. I haven't earned that. But I wanted you to know that at least one Bennett recognizes how wrongly you were treated and admires what you've built in spite of us. Not because of us." The sincerity in his voice reached something in me, not the wounded child still seeking family approval, but the confident woman who could now view the Bennetts with neither bitterness nor need. "Thank you for saying that," I said simply. "It means something, even now." As James prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. "There's one more thing you should know. Mother is planning to contest Margaret Hayes's will." My breath caught. "What? On what grounds?" "She's claiming Margaret was manipulated during her final illness, that you exerted undue influence as a virtual stranger to secure the inheritance." His expression was grim. "It's nonsense legally, but it could cause you complications, unwanted publicity for Principled capital." The news should have infuriated me, but instead, I felt an odd sense of calm. Of course Elizabeth Bennett would make one final attempt to control the narrative, to punish me for choosing my birth family's legacy over hers. "Let her try," I said with quiet confidence. Margaret Hayes documented everything meticulously, including Elizabeth's role in keeping us apart all these years. If Elizabeth wants that information made public through legal proceedings, that's her choice. James nodded, understanding the implicit threat. "I'll try to talk her out of it. Not that she listens to me these days." After he left, I sat for a long time, turning our conversation over in my mind. There had been a time when James's approval, his acknowledgement of my worth, would have meant everything to me. Now, it was just information. Data points about a family I no longer oriented my life around. My phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. Daniel Calloway's name flashed on the screen. "Olivia," he greeted me. "I'm glad I caught you. I wanted to update you on the Atlanta property situation." "Actually, Daniel," I interrupted, suddenly certain of my decision, "I'm not selling the house." There was a brief pause. "May I ask, what changed your mind?" I realized it's not just a property asset. It's part of my history, a history I'm still discovering. "Margaret would be pleased," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "What are your plans for it?" A vision had been forming in my mind over the past weeks, though I had only now allowed myself to acknowledge it fully. "I'm going to establish a foundation," I said, the idea solidifying as I spoke. "The Charlotte Hayes Foundation for Young Mothers. We'll provide housing, education support, and childcare for young women who choose to keep their babies despite difficult circumstances. Women like my mother." That's wonderful, Olivia. Truly fitting. "The Hayes House will be the foundation's headquarters," I continued. "Those rooms that have been empty for so long should be filled with life again, with young women and their children, with hope and second chances." As I outlined my plans to Daniel, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This was how I would honor Charlotte's memory and Margaret's belated efforts to right old wrongs. Not by simply preserving their wealth or their name, but by extending their legacy in a direction that reflected their values and mine. Later that evening, as I stood by the window of my Seattle apartment watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, I held Charlotte's compass pendant in one hand and the Hayes signet ring in the other. The physical symbols of my newfound identity felt warm against my skin, as if imbued with the strength of the women who had come before me. Elizabeth's threatened legal challenge didn't frighten me. The potential publicity didn't concern me. I knew who I was now, not a Bennett by adoption or a Hayes by birth, but Olivia on my own terms, carrying forward the best of both legacies while discarding what didn't serve my authentic self. The journey from unwanted adopted daughter to confident CEO and foundation creator had been painful, complicated, and entirely necessary. Each rejection, each dismissal, each "you were never our real child anyway," had pushed me toward the person I was meant to become. Someone who defined family not by blood or legal documents, but by shared values and mutual respect. As the light faded from the sky, I made a silent promise to both my mothers, the one who had fought to keep me and the one who had raised me, however imperfectly. I would build something that honored the best of what each had given me: Charlotte's courage and determination, Elizabeth's attention to detail and presentation. I would create a legacy that transcended the limitations both women had faced in their different ways. The inheritance lawyer had indeed called the Bennetts, but not with the message they expected. Instead of forcing me back into their fold through financial necessity, Margaret Hayes's bequest had freed me completely from any need for their approval or support. More importantly, it had connected me to a history and heritage that helped me understand who I truly was and always had been. Sometimes rejection is simply redirection. Sometimes being told, "you were never our real child," is the harsh truth that sets you free to discover where you truly belong. And sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property, or even a family name. It's the courage to walk away from what doesn't serve you and build something authentic in its place. I was Olivia Hayes, CEO of Principled Capital, founder of the Charlotte Hayes Foundation, granddaughter of Margaret, daughter of Charlotte, and entirely, unapologetically myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.